even the ones in our hives. And they just allow us. Is that the way you describe it?
And is adequate enough, sufficiently adequate for them to consent to stay with us.
When I discovered that the varroa mite had really decimated the population of the feral bees, it was that tipping point for me to begin to understand how far we had gone with our, the ecology that we're living in, how desperate the situation is, why that didn't happen when it was the owls in Washington or the tigers in elsewhere. To my being and my consciousness, I think it's because I experienced bees from the time I was, before I could speak. I remember stepping on my first bee. It taught me to wear shoes outdoors. But we have a relationship with these creatures, which is why I think that it affected me. So it was then that I began to look more carefully. It was then that I began to see that there was, that the bees were, yes, we call them the canary in the mine. They're giving us information about what's happening on our planet. And so it was a very short trip then from looking at pollen and looking at what's happening with bee colony collapse and what's happening with the bees to be able to look at what's happening with the human species and human culture in terms of chemicals, in terms of pesticides, in terms of the things we put in our packaging, in terms of what is called food and is not food. So then I began to look at other literature, and I'm sure this will get a laugh, and I decided it didn't matter. The science of skinny. This is not a diet book. This is a book that informed me, that the food products that we put into our bodies, not the food. I mean, we've been in certain circles, we've understood that we should shop on the periphery of the large supermarkets because what's in the middle isn't really food. I don't think anyone said it to me that way, but as I began reading, I began to understand that this simulated food, that these flavorings that we're eating, that the preservatives in the packaging and the chemicals, this woman is a organic chemist. And she began she was always overweight, which is where the skinny piece comes in. And her favorite thing was this box of cake mix. She would make this cake mix regularly. And when she went home from her job one day and took out the cake mix to make the cake mix and started to mix it up and looked at the box for kind of the directions or the ingredients or whatever it was she was looking for, and found a chemical detergent that she was exploring in her lab that was an industrial cleanser in the ingredients of the box cake mix. That's what began her transformation, to begin to understand what happens to our bodies when these preservatives, when these chemicals are put into our bodies. What happens in the body is the taste buds, the sight, all of our senses perceive the food products as we're addicted to them. We want them. They're magnificent. Whether it's macaroni and cheese or something that's so saturated with sugar, they're addictive substances. But when they get inside of our body says, our organs, all the things that are intended to function by taking in this food, not just nutrients, which they add back in, but this food, our body can't process it. It's not food. So our body is beginning to respond by not functioning properly. And I don't think we have to go through, it's a very long list, the things that are much more prevalent now in our lives than have been in the past. And we have this obesity epidemic, And what she believes is that it's because our body is not functioning. It's not, I put this sugar into my body and so I'm obese. It's, I put this chemical into my body again and again and again. Think about what our kids want. Our kids want all that. They don't want to be on the periphery. I used to shop with my granddaughter and I'd say, okay, you can go pick out one thing that's, you know, sweet and whatever you want, one thing, and the rest pick out some good food to eat. And I'd shop the periphery and she'd shop the center and we'd come back together. And, you know, that's what they're after. So it's, Dee McCaffrey's idea is that if we stop eating these foods, we will solve our obesity problem without doing anything but, and again, you know, we're all conscious, so we try to eat really well. So I've tried to eat really well for a long time, but when I really paid attention and stopped eating everything that was in the middle, so this is what this fellow, Green Intelligence, says that there are 40,000 food products in your standard supermarket. 40,000. It's almost incomprehensible. And again, food products are not food. So, so that really is what allowed me to come to find the metaphor for the work that I've done that's in the gallery. Because what's happening with the bees is analogous, is that the word I want, to what's happening with human beings?
You know, why didn't it happen with the spotted owl? Why didn't that flip me into another kind of consciousness? And whether it's what level of the consciousness, whether it's a kind of a intellectual or a somatic kind of consciousness or a spiritual awareness, that bees are different because on some level we know that they are an integrated somatic reality. They're not they don't really live as individuals. They live as a colony. They live as beings utterly dependent on one another, utterly dependent on and interrelated with one another. And so when even an organism that is so successful for millennia co-evolved with all the flowers in the Western Hemisphere, because to pollinate and the bees are matched with the flowers, they could survive and endure and thrive and flourish that long over that wide a space, like us. And those problems, we know there's a connection, however conscious it might be or not. And Einstein said, if the bees disappear, in 4 years, we'll follow. And Al said to me, if bees produced honey but didn't sting you, they'd be extinct by now. If they didn't have something to hold us back from exploiting them, then they'd be gone by now. And we would have followed. You said that to me, remember?
You can't remember every profound thing you said.
No. Why? Well, go ahead.
Well, the other great thing you said to me, when I first started being, is when I first got involved with bees, Al said, always remember that they are not just insects. They are a superorganism. And that's a term from evolutionary biology, which